Okay, good evening and welcome. I'm so glad that you could join us for the inaugural Baker Award Distinguished Lecture. I'm Marian Wanamaker, and it is a privilege to lead Tennessee's first School of Public Policy and Public Affairs, one that proudly carries the name and legacy of Senator Howard H. Baker Jr. Last November, we marked what would have been Senator Baker's 100th birthday. And as we reflected on his life, one quality came up again and again. When you spoke with Senator Baker, you felt heard. He listened carefully, respected different viewpoints, and made space for others at the table, even when they disagreed with him. Many members of our Board of Advisors worked closely with Senator Baker, and they knew him well. And as they thought about how best to honor his centennial, they offered a simple but powerful idea. Don't just look back, look forward, and find the next generation of leaders who carry his values. And from that idea, the Howard H. Baker Jr. Award for Public Service was born. The award recognizes leaders who still have the courage to lead the Baker way. Leaders who demonstrate his three core principles: confidence in America's institutions, a commitment to finding common ground, and the humility to believe that the other fella still might be right. At the Baker School, our mission is to graduate students grounded in that legacy. And we hope that each Baker Award recipient joins our students in carrying those values forward into communities across Tennessee, but also across the country. And in just a few minutes, you will meet our inaugural recipient, Mayor David Holt, a leader who embodies these principles in powerful and timely ways. To introduce our inaugural recipient, please join me in welcoming John Stavik. John is an assistant professor here at the Baker School, where he teaches public financial administration and studies state tax policy and budgeting. In the classroom and through his scholarship, John's work supports sustainable financial management and good budgeting at the state and local level, topics I know the mayor appreciates, even if the rest of us are a little cross-eyed. So please help me in welcoming John Stavik.
Good afternoon. It is my privilege to introduce Mayor David Holt, the inaugural recipient of the Howard H. Baker Jr. Award for Public Service. Senator Howard Baker was famously known as the Great Conciliator. Throughout his career, and especially during his time in the U.S. Senate, he was guided by a deep belief that progress comes from building consensus among people with differing viewpoints, listening carefully, and working together toward a common purpose. That spirit of consensus building is powerfully reflected in the story of Oklahoma City's ongoing renaissance. In 1992, Oklahoma made a consequential choice to chart a new course of urban renewal and to forge a shared identity as a big league city. What followed was not a single project or an amenity, but decades of sustained investment. The following year, voters approved the first of several major municipal bond initiatives, investing in projects such as performing arts venues, libraries, a river walk, and an arena that would define the city's future. But Oklahoma City's vision was never limited to building what might be called the fun things. Over the past 3 decades, the city has made and continues to make substantial investments in the less visible foundations of urban success: streets, water systems, and core infrastructure. Last fall, voters approved an infrastructure bond package totaling $2.7 billion funded through the property tax. What is remarkable is not only the scale of these investments, it is the consistency of public support behind them. Oklahoma City voters approved 11 separate bond issues, each with more than 70% support, including projects many residents never directly see but clearly understand are essential to the quality of life that Oklahoma City can offer. That level of trust is neither automatic nor an accident. It is earned through a proven track record of delivering results, transparent decision-making, and prudent financial management. It reflects a city where residents trust that their leaders will do what they say and do it well. It is precisely this combination of consensus building, fiscal stewardship, and long-term vision that makes Mayor Holt such a fitting recipient of an award bearing Howard Baker's name. Please join me in welcoming the inaugural recipient of the Howard H. Baker Jr. Award for Public Service, the Mayor of Oklahoma City, David Holt.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, John, and Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. I just can't thank you all. By the way, can you hear me okay? We're on this thing. Well, first of all, I can't thank you all enough for the hospitality from everyone connected with the Baker School and for this incredible honor. It was a complete surprise when Dean Wanamaker reached out last fall, and I want you to know how meaningful it is to be acknowledged in this way. It is vitally important at this moment in our nation's history to encourage public servants who model the style of public service embodied by United States Senator Howard Baker. And so I am personally grateful for this validation and encouragement, but even more grateful that this award now exists and that it will be bestowed upon others in the years to come. In accepting this award, I have been asked to share a few thoughts, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. Certainly, I want to speak this evening of the ideals for which I believe Senator Baker stood. There are many ways to reference the American form of government. Personally, I am fond of the American experiment. I like this phrase because calling it an experiment reminds us that what we have created here in the United States is an outlier in human history. Across the span of thousands of years of recorded civilization, most humans have lived and do live in some form of autocracy. Even today, less than half of the humans living on this planet reside in a nation that can even claim to be running some version of a democracy. As residents of this great nation, there is nothing in our literal DNA that assures us this form of government. It is only made possible by intentional cultivation of our civic DNA. Many people assess the autocratic societies around the world through the lens of personal freedom or its lack thereof, and that absence of personal agency is also obviously accompanied by a lack of collective agency. Most humans have lived and do live in situations where there is no peaceful recourse to alter the direction of their society. Most people outside of the United States don't have a clear path forward for changing policy through advocacy and persuasion or elections. Change does inevitably come, of course, but it typically comes through violence. In most societies, violence is the only way to resolve conflict. It is the only way to make change. It is the only way to win an argument. And to the extent words are utilized, they exist to inspire collective violence. In America, since 1796, regime change has meant a presidential election. In most other places, it means trauma, tragedy, and death. And so the American experiment is an outlier in human history in that it provides us an outlet to make change without violence. If I could distill the entire American experiment down to one purpose, it is that. The American experiment, the American form of government, is an alternative to violence. And of course, I'm well aware that even with that option, Americans have occasionally still fallen back upon their most unfortunate human instincts. Civil War battlefields and the memorial in my city are testaments to that. But to date, we have always recovered from those challenges. The Republic has survived, as Senator Baker might say. But here, in 2026, in the aftermath of January 6th, amidst bitter partisanship, the continued breaking of established norms, misinformation and conspiracy theories, a general lack of seriousness in government, and an abundance of vulgarity in the nation's political life, it does feel as if we are facing another of those challenging moments. As such, it is a fitting time to revisit some foundational principles. These principles I will touch upon this evening are not necessarily written in our founding documents. This experiment has endured not just because we have kept the Constitution hermetically sealed in a case at the National Archives. Our experiment has endured because of a shared commitment by public servants, voters, and citizens to behaviors that are largely unwritten. And the only enforcement mechanism is a common understanding that the experiment will otherwise collapse if these democratic behaviors are neglected. And so we live in such a time where these principles must be articulated again. And if Senator Baker were still with us, I believe he would do so. In my own words, but aided by some of Senator Baker's, I'd like to share 5 principles as I see them. If there were a title to this how-to manual to sustain the American experiment, it would be the simple but profound wisdom captured in Senator Baker's statement that the other fellow may be right. My first principle is that pluralism is inescapable. It cannot be extinguished, and no attempt should be made to do so. Any such effort will only be met with disappointment and gridlock. Pluralism is a word that feels a bit too political sciencey, but we need to talk more about pluralism. Pluralism is the reality that there will always be many different worldviews, experiences, and ideologies in a nation of over 340 million Americans. We will never be homogenous in our views. We will never all be persuaded to one philosophy, and that's okay. It has to be okay because it simply is. We can and should attempt to persuade others of our views, but we should never see ourselves as warriors in a new crusade sent to convert or destroy. We will never all see everything the same way, and so pluralism is a constant no less powerful than gravity. It is implicit in Senator Baker's turn of phrase about the other fellow, that the other fellow has a different view, and it's apparently not changing despite the senator's best efforts. So what do we do then? Well, this leads to my second principle, and that is that if pluralism is a constant, then we have no choice but to accept compromise. It is fashionable these days to portray our ideological differences as a threat to our experiment. This is a red herring. Our system assumes policy differences. Our system is not built for a homogeneous nation. It is built for pluralism. Our ideological differences are only a problem if we will not accept compromise. The great conciliator, as Senator Baker was known, certainly accepted compromise. Senator Baker once said, "It is the revolution of conflict that makes the difference between successful self-government and civil warfare." As I said earlier, the American political experiment is an alternative to violence. In the violent resolution of conflicts, the allure, I suppose, is that one of us will achieve total victory. But compromise achieves a different, more nuanced outcome. And in an ideal compromise, both sides achieve at least partial victory. The American political system offers the mechanism for arriving at this fair and equitable and reasonable outcome. There are opportunities for feedback at election time and throughout every step of the decision-making process. And in that process, different factions are forced to work through their differences in legislative bodies, usually subject to approval from a broadly elected executive and bounded by the rule of law as enforced by a judicial system. This thoughtful process delivers outcomes that are good enough. That's the best case scenario. Almost no one is likely to say that the outcome is perfect, but virtually everyone is going to see some of what they wanted in the outcome. And a good compromise is probably going to leave about 70% of people saying that it was good enough. That's a consensus in American politics. Of course, there will always be people who will say that good enough is not good enough. That's the 15% at each extreme. And that collective 30% isn't part of the consensus. That 30% tends to be those who are both extreme in their ideology and their approach. We have to watch out for them because they would have us kill each other. We have to be brave enough to say to them that good enough is good enough. In Oklahoma City, where I come from, we get things done relentlessly. And to do so, we accept good enough and we embrace compromise. Let me share an example. I became mayor in 2018. By that point, our city was already in a renaissance, largely fueled by an initiative known as MAPS. MAPS stands for Metropolitan Area Projects, and it is a 1-cent temporary sales tax that invests in quality of life infrastructure. We passed previous MAPS initiatives in 1993, 2001, and 2009. When I took office in 2018, it was time to develop a new MAPS and present it to the voters. It was universally believed that successful passage of another MAPS package was critical to continuing our city's momentum. Being the fourth iteration of this initiative, this MAPS would be known as MAPS 4. We are numbering them like a movie series at this point. MAPS 3 had passed in 2009 with just 54%, so it wasn't necessarily the case that success was preordained. And frankly, I was a little worried about complacency. Maps is a tax, and people will always find reasons not to vote for a tax. Perhaps after all these years, they would say that it was time to move on. So I made the development of maps my life's work for the first 18 months of my mayoral tenure. First, we launched the Maps 4 process with a public campaign to accept ideas, and we received thousands. Then we narrowed those to 16 proposals. Then we held nearly 25 hours of public hearings at City Hall and invited anyone and everyone to come and speak on those 16 proposed projects. We listened more often than we spoke, as Senator Baker suggested in a quote displayed right outside this room. And then, having spent a year listening to how the people of Oklahoma City wanted to move forward with the new Maps initiative, I finally sat down and crafted the package. Maps 4 would be one vote by the people of Oklahoma City, up or down. I ultimately decided I wanted to include all 16 projects that had emerged as finalists, but they did not collectively represent a unified worldview. Some projects were more focused on economic development, like a new arena at our fairgrounds to continue attracting horse shows, a soccer stadium to maintain and expand the sports and entertainment events we could host, and investments in what we call our city's innovation district. Those projects were generally attracted to people you might stereotypically associate with the right side of the political spectrum. Other projects are more attractive to people you might think of as on the left side of the political spectrum. Those included a museum telling our city's civil rights story, mental health crisis centers, new transit options, and housing for the homeless. Only the mayor liked all 16 projects. But even if most residents would tell you they didn't like some of the projects, most of them liked enough of the projects to vote yes. In its totality, the Maps 4 proposal was a classic compromise. I very intentionally set out to create a package that would be good enough for a broad spectrum of the electorate. I did not set out to create something that was perfect for any one group. This kind of compromise has become so foreign to many Americans that some people were suspicious. Some accused me of just trying to please everyone, to which I said, yes, that's my job. And so I presented the entire Maps 4 package to the voters of Oklahoma City in late 2019, and it got 72% approval, the largest margin of support in city history for a sales tax. Thank you. The mayor can appreciate that. Since then, I've presented many more compromises to my voters. An arena package in 2023 for $1 billion to retain the NBA in OKC that got 71%. A $2.7 billion core infrastructure package in 2025 just mentioned that was actually nearly a dozen different votes with support ranging as low as 75% and as high as 85%. And then just 2 months ago, I presented the compromiser himself for my quadrennial review. And on February 10th, I was reelected to a third term with 86.5% of the vote. Now, let me explain something interesting about Oklahoma City that may surprise you based on the monolithic election results I just described. We are very diverse in every way. We are an almost perfect microcosm of the country, politically and demographically. In 2020 and 2024, in the county that encompasses most of Oklahoma City, the Republican for president beat the Democrat for president 49-48. That was the exact same margin in both 2020 and 2024. That's basically 50-50, just like the country. And our demographics also mirror the country. We are about 14% African American and 20% Latino. And yet, unlike the country, we are passing initiatives and electing candidates with 71, 72, 85, 86% of the vote. Republicans, Democrats, and independents are coming together and voting the same way on the same day in Oklahoma City. Why? Because we are listening to each other, incorporating elements of everyone's preferences in the outcome, and then we're compromising. We are a living case study that the political process doesn't have to be polarizing, and it doesn't have to be winner take all. In OKC, we accept that the other fellow might win as well. We have to be okay with that. We can't be so scorched earth in our approach that we are almost more focused on withholding success from others than we are our own desires. We must be willing to arrive at outcomes where everybody wins a little. And in our candidate electoral process in Oklahoma City, candidates like myself are rewarded for this behavior. We are incentivized to bring people together. When I run for mayor, I do not run through a closed partisan primary. This is pretty common in mayoral systems around the country, but it is obviously not how state and federal officials are elected. Those candidates generally have to go through a closed partisan primary where a small, extreme, and uncompromising subset of the electorate acts as a gatekeeper. But when you run for mayor of Oklahoma City, all of the candidates have to face all of the voters, and all of the voters get to see all of the candidates. This incentivizes mayors to build coalitions of the 70% of people in the middle. And as it turns out, that 70% still believes in compromise. Americans are not polarized. Some of us are, the 15% at each end of the spectrum. And unfortunately, through closed partisan primaries, they control who represents us. But the reality is that there are 70% of us in the middle, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, who just want to get things done. We have proven that out in Oklahoma City. This leads to my third principle, and that is that we must communicate to our public servants that we understand the need to compromise, and that a willingness to compromise does not mean you have abandoned your values. Our American experiment only works when it works. It has to produce outcomes. Senator Baker once said that his greatest legacy as Senate Majority Leader was that this place works. Leaders who want things to work have to accept compromise. And leaders who accept compromise are sometimes mistakenly called moderates. I have no problem with moderates, but accepting a compromise does not necessarily mean you are a moderate. It means that you wish to be effective. Compromise is how you affect your desired change. Pragmatism is not an ideology, it is a tactic. We must communicate better that we understand this. We must assess our leaders and representatives with at least two different measurements, their ideology and their approach. It was often noted by supporters and opponents alike that Senator Baker was sometimes described as a moderate Republican, when in reality he consistently voted like a conservative Republican. One senator noted that Senator Baker and Senator Barry Goldwater would take the same position, and that somehow Senator Baker would come off looking like a statesman, and Senator Goldwater would come off looking like a stubborn ideologue. I suspect this was because of their different approaches to compromise. Observers knew Senator Baker would work the American political process to effect some change, even if it was less than he originally desired, and they knew Senator Goldwater likely would not. An uncompromising stance never yields any outcome at all in a democratic system like ours. It is folly for us to reward that kind of behavior. And yet we live in a time when candidates for public office love to tell you that they will fight for you. They very rarely state anymore in their commercials that they will work across the aisle to get things done. They will instead ask you to send a fighter to Washington. There is very little about the American political system that rewards fighting. Show me a fighter and I will show you a legislative failure. Now, sure, debate vigorously, work hard, articulate your principles, attempt to persuade, but at some point, you're going to have to sit at a table with people who have a different worldview, and you're going to have to give up something to get something. You can fight, but not to the death. An uncompromising approach is ascendant right now at the federal level. And so what do we see? We see gridlock. No real progress, just tweets and press conferences. Nothing happens, and when nothing happens, the public pines for autocracy, because it gets things done. They forget that once they give up their freedoms and their agency in exchange for efficiency, they never get those things back. We have to start compromising again, and we have to tell our leaders and our representatives that it is okay to do so in order that our systems might work again. Senator Baker was first a conservative, and second, he was a willing negotiator. This acknowledgement of the realities of our system made him infinitely more effective, but it did not make him a moderate. To hold conservative or liberal philosophical principles and to be moderated in your approach is not a contradiction. We have to better understand this duality so that we may better incentivize and direct our elected officials. My fourth principle is that we each have to respect the basic humanity of our fellow Americans. If we are acknowledging pluralism and encouraging compromise, we are inherently accepting that everyone's opinion counts equally. That respect is also manifested through civility towards our fellow Americans. This civility was intrinsic to Senator Baker's ethos. Senator Baker once said, "If we cannot be civil with one another, if we stop dealing with those who disagree with us or those we do not like, we would soon stop functioning altogether." Mayors understand this. I currently serve as president of the nation's mayors. Because of that, the leadership of our organization gathered in Oklahoma City in September, just a couple weeks after the high-profile murder of Charlie Kirk. That murder had followed a series of other violent acts and murders of public officials of both parties across the United States. That day in September last year in Oklahoma City, about 50 of us mayors gathered at the Oklahoma City National Memorial, the site of the deadliest act of political violence in lived memory. At a federal office building in downtown Oklahoma City on April 19, 1995, a veteran of our military planted a truck bomb and killed 168 of our residents. Today, there is a moving memorial there, and one key element is the survivor tree, a tree that survived the bombing and came back stronger than ever. Under the survivor tree, the mayors signed the Oklahoma City Declaration. The Oklahoma City Declaration was something that I sat down and wrote the night before our meeting. It's a 2-page document that rejects political violence and positions pluralism, compromise, and persuasion as key elements of our democratic experiment. And it presents a series of practical beliefs we as mayors are committed to. I'd like to share them with you today, just as they are written in the Declaration. In the Oklahoma City Declaration, we mayors stated we believe that political violence in any form is unacceptable and should be met with the harshest condemnation and penalties. We will condemn those who use or condone political violence and will seek full accountability for their actions, even if their political position was one with which we agreed. We stated that even in a pluralistic society, those things we have in common still far exceed those things that make us different. We will seek ways to inject our shared humanity into debates, even when those debates are emotional. In fact, especially when those debates are emotional. We stated that civility matters because it is a reflection of our respect for our shared humanity. We will refrain from referring to those with whom we disagree by anything but their preferred name. And if they have a title, we will use it. We stated that dehumanization is the rhetorical device that has paved the way to the worst atrocities in human history. We will refrain from referring to those Americans with whom we disagree as enemies or evil, or with terms that imply they are less than human in any way. We stated that we each deserve to be treated as individuals. We will refrain from imputing the actions or statements of one person or group to everyone we perceive to be in agreement with that person or group's political positions. We stated that there is no issue within the confines of the American experiment outside of insurrection or war that is truly existential. And so we will refrain from apocalyptic political rhetoric. We stated that truth matters, especially when false information contributes to unnecessary outrage and emotion. We will refrain from spreading false information and will correct and condemn the spread of false information, even when it originates from a person or group whose position is one with which we agree. We stated that everyone participating in the American experiment is motivated by the same thing, a better life for all of us. Unless there are serious allegations to the contrary, we will refrain from questioning the personal motivations of those with whom we disagree. I would add here as an aside today that Senator Baker once said that it ill behooves America's leaders to inveigh carelessly against motives and morals of one's political adversaries. Continuing with the declaration, we mayors stated that not every thought has to be expressed out loud, especially on social media. We will use social media responsibly and with restraint. I would add here that Senator Baker once quoted his father-in-law, Senator Everett Dirksen, who said, "Occasionally allow yourself the luxury of an unexpressed thought." And finally, to conclude the Oklahoma City Declaration, America's mayors stated that we are humans first, Americans second, and partisans last. Since that time, over 230 bipartisan mayors have now signed the Oklahoma City Declaration, including Mayor Angia Kincannon of Knoxville. My fifth and final principle today is that truth and morality have to be at the core of our experiment, or it collapses under the weight of its own dishonor and corruption. Senator Baker once said, "Tell the truth, whether you have to or not." The moral clarity of that statement is so profound. We must adhere to the truth even when it seems unnecessary. Why? Because we will eventually pay a price when Americans can no longer trust that we care about the truth. On this point, I have no greater example than Senator Baker's courageous oversight of the Senate's Watergate investigation. As his Democratic colleague on the Watergate Committee, Senator Sam Ervin, would later say, Senator Baker gave primacy to his country and to his duty to ascertain what the truth was. Ervin added that Baker placed his loyalty to the country above his loyalty to the Republican Party. These 5 principles I have attempted to articulate this evening are really mere echoes of observations made for generations about our American experiment. You can look to de Tocqueville or Senator Baker himself for even greater wisdom. I am merely attempting to communicate these principles to a modern audience in need of accessible reminders. One American who did not need any such reminders was, of course, Senator Baker. Senator Howard Baker was a statesman who understood those principles deeply. He articulated them well throughout his life. Senator Baker once described the greatest senators in our history as those who brought principled courage, creative compromise, and persuasive eloquence. He articulated those qualities and he lived those qualities. We ignore his words and his example at our peril. I'll close with that word I just used to describe Senator Baker, statesman. Personally, I think it is the highest honorific I can bestow upon an American public servant. It carries with it all the best connotations. Within itself, it communicates the most important concept of all. You are the best public servant and citizen when you put the state and its people before the man or woman who serves. I've said over 4,000 words just now, but if we can each simply remember the pursuit of that one ideal, to be a statesman, we will further Senator Baker's legacy, and more importantly, we will fulfill our obligation to pass this American experiment on to the next generation so that the Republic may endure. Thank you. Thank you.
First, I want to say that was very inspiring. I'm going to go out on a limb and speak for everyone in the room and say that I think your comments make us all very proud to be associated with Senator Baker's legacy and proud to see them so eloquently exemplified through your speech. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So my comments or questions actually have to do with what can we learn from Oklahoma City and its string of successes. Mm-hmm. For an outsider like me, it's easy to look at Oklahoma City and say, okay, wow, 30 years ago, they made this decision to really invest in itself. It has had, in the past couple of years, just string after string of major successes. New arena on the way, successful ballot initiatives, NBA championship, landed the NBA team and got the championship, LA Olympics on the way in 2 years. And you look at all of that and say, wow, cities of that size rarely dream of doing as much as that. So where do you go from there?
Well, I feel like, and let me back up just a little bit. I don't assume everybody, you've touched around the story, but we started passing these MAPS initiatives in '93. We're 15-0 ever since and investing in ourselves through tax initiatives to fund capital infrastructure to the tune of almost $10 billion, not even adjusted for inflation. So what we embraced was obviously the paramount importance of investing in our quality of life, and the vital importance of just investing in ourselves, period. I don't know really of any other city that's passed probably half that many initiatives over that same 30-year period. And to dump $10 billion in public funding for infrastructure into a city the size of Oklahoma City obviously has made a tremendous impact. And we've seen the impact through population growth and GDP growth and just, an ascension on the national and global stage that is culminating in things like an NBA championship and the opportunity to host 7 events for the Olympics in 2028. So your question, though, is what's next? I would say, well, in the near term, first of all, I expect to be at another championship parade this summer. A little farther out, we're going to have a heck of a time hosting 2 sports and 7 events for the Olympics in 2028. That same year, we're going to open a $1 billion new arena. That same year, we're going to open a new soccer stadium. And we have a lot of maps, really cool Maps4 projects coming online in the next few years. But what I really felt like happened last year with the championship, because I'm a big believer that having a major league professional sports team, especially in the MLB, the NBA, or the NFL in America, is kind of what it takes to be treated with credibility. And if you don't like sports, it's kind of hard for you to buy into that, but it is what it is. Most Americans are crazy about sports, and they sort of judge a city's value as to whether it's participating in those leagues. It just sort of sends a shorthand message that this is a city that's big enough, has the general wherewithal to host one of these brands. And it tends to bring credibility to lots of other things that maybe have nothing to do with basketball. So we crossed that first threshold in 2008, but winning the championship, just took it to a whole nother level. And I really have felt ever since that our city has sort of arrived. And there's lots of people in Oklahoma City who felt that milestone to some extent many times over the last 30 years. But I'll give an anecdotal example of what that arrival felt like to me. A week after we won the NBA championship last June, there was a story in The Economist, and The Economist is like the best read news magazine in the Western Hemisphere, and it was titled "Big League City, Oklahoma City is a city transformed." And it was just all about how awesome we were. I mean, you can't buy that kind of publicity. And yet it wouldn't have been possible if the Pacers had scored more points than us in Game 7, So the championship may be a superficial on-court sports accomplishment, but it's like opened these doors, right? And we're going to walk through those doors for years to come. And so I really feel like for us, the next decade, first of all, brings what arrival really feels like and looks like. I mean, arrival is when your story begins for everybody else. Like we've been living the story for 30 years, but like now is when other people are really paying attention to us. And so the growth becomes kind of exponential and the opportunities kind of become exponential. And, we've seen it in other cities. We think we might be on that path. We have people come all the time who say, boy, this feels like Nashville 20 years ago or Austin 20 years ago. And whether that happens or not, I mean, it certainly feels like a real possibility. And so I think that these next 10 or 20 years will render the city once again sort of unrecognizable from what we've known over these last 30 years. And we've seen a lot of change. But I also know that Oklahoma City will keep looking for the next big thing. One other hallmark of our journey has been that we have never stopped. We've never rested on our laurels. I mean, okay, so since 93, 15 tax initiatives. I mean, that's like an average of a tax initiative every other year, right? So that is, a relentless desire for success and progress that has seemingly never been satiated. And I would say, I already know, probably in 2027, we're going to run a big transit initiative. We've been talking about it for years. It's going to be probably something that involves 3 different cities in the metro. And it will ultimately put billions of dollars into a better public transit system that we really need to stay ahead of the growth I'm talking about. So we never really stop, we've never really said, that's it, we're good, we've got everything we need. We always look for the next big thing. And that's, I think, another thing that makes us unique. So I know that the next 10 years will bring a lot of growth. It'll bring a lot of fun events, a lot of fun opportunities, and I think it'll bring, again, sort of a relentless pursuit of progress that I think has certainly characterized our journey over this last quarter century.
So about those tax initiatives that have been pretty successful over the years, it's difficult for many citizens to make the connection between the taxes they pay and the benefits they receive. The connection is nebulous at best, and people are accustomed to getting something back for the money they pay in taxes. If they try to look at the municipal budget, oftentimes it's a 400-page PDF monstrosity that's intimidating and difficult to distill. So if we're trying to get information about how the city spends its money, it's difficult. And yet at the same time, that might make it difficult for some citizens to support, because I think they're not sure what the extra money is going for. So I'm wondering, in Oklahoma City, is there some kind of like a communication campaign that enables citizens and taxpayers to understand exactly the return on investment if the ballot initiatives pass?
Yes. Well, first of all, one of the hallmarks of MAPS and really all of our initiatives since 1993, when this run began, has been that first of all, virtually every single one of those tax votes, some were for sales tax, some were for property tax. Every single one is temporary. Every single one. The sales taxes always have a sunset date, and the bond issues are always about a 10-year plan, and then we got to come back to you. So they're always a sunset, and that means they always have a defined list of projects. So MAPS is always very easy to digest. The original one was 9 projects. MAPS 2 was known as MAPS for Kids. It kind of deviated from the model, and it was for school buildings, but nonetheless, those projects were defined. But in MAPS 3, it was 8 projects. MAPS 4 is 16 projects. Through the development, through the media, through the campaign, people knew what those projects were for the most part. They could probably have told you quite a few of them on the day of the election. So it's easy to kind of wrap your arms around. Obviously, as time goes on, you build up trust and you believe us. It was harder at the beginning. But even at the beginning, we could say, well, if it doesn't work out, it is just a 5-year tax. Your mistake will only last for 5 years. And so that sunset has been very important to us. It does force you as a community to have to go through this exercise repeatedly, and that's and there's expense to that, because the campaign is often paid for by the business. It is always paid for by the business community. But we're just kind of used to it now. We kind of a well-oiled machine, and we just turn it on. So I think, though, that the public knows what we're going to do. They know that the tax will end, and then we have had a symbiotic relationship with our Chamber of Commerce from the very beginning, and they have funded all those campaigns. They can't call an election. We can't fund a campaign. So we work together. And we're part of, we have a dialogue that's going on, even the development of the projects. And we're also doing a lot of smart things behind the scenes politically. We're polling. We're understanding what people are willing to vote for. When we were developing MAPS 4, we took 25 projects and we went and polled them. And there were things that were really unpopular, and I wouldn't necessarily have known that intuitively unless I asked. And so that's part of the process of scientific polling, that kind of stuff you probably study here from a political science perspective is also really valuable, because the feedback you get anecdotally is not always going to be very reflective of where people really are. You need that scientific polling as well. So, but yeah, now we're obviously getting big margins. I just talked about that. I would say that the last thing I did to kind of unlock an even larger margin was when I took office, we were sort of passing things in the high 50s and 60s. And I still felt like the liability in our city was that we didn't have the buy-in from kind of diverse communities, different parts of the city. Every city's got its geographic divides. Ours was always the south side voted against things and the north side carried them. And so I came in with this ethos I'm wearing on my lapel, which is One OKC. And I'm including, even before the vote on Maps 4, I'm including all these communities that had never felt a part of our narrative in the decision-making process, both symbolically and substantively. And that was what, to me, felt like unlocked now these even wider margins where we're getting into the 70s and 80s. We've never had the community, a broader spectrum of the community feel a part of our story as they do today. And that does kind of go back a little bit to leadership, and so right now, we're just completely unified. It feels like we could pass anything, but we need to be responsible with that because you can certainly squander that trust quickly.
So I have time for one more question before we turn over to the audience. And we have several students in the room here at the Baker School, and it probably comes as no surprise that many of them are interested in careers in, say, municipal government or in the public sector in general. What advice do you have for them as they prepare to enter that career and be successful?
Well, public service is a noble calling. I think maybe that's even written on the wall somewhere out here. And so we need it. We need you. I think we have a burden, I would say, as literal adults in the room. We've got to deliver a world where people can do noble public service like Senator Baker and like I just described, I fear that we've created, a political system, at least at the state and federal level, that can seem not very welcoming if you're a serious-minded person wanting to do serious things. And it's kind of, Washington right now is like watching professional wrestling, it's not real. And so it's kind of hard to I would imagine that's a little jarring when we sit in these classrooms at the Baker School and we talk about all this serious legislating that was done and all these high-minded efforts. And then they're like, okay, sure. And then they go back to their dorm room and they turn on cable news and they're like, that's not what they were telling me happens in Washington. And so we've got to get that straightened out. And I think that, there's a reason a lot of speeches I give, I'll talk about closed partisan primaries because I think that's a big thing. And I think that, the people of America have got to figure out a way to create incentive structures for elected officials that reward the kind of behavior that Senator Baker stood for and the kind of outcomes that he stood for. And to do that, you got to get back to where all elected officials can do what I do, which is listen to the 70% of the people in the middle. So I want these young people to stay idealistic and to stay engaged because we really, really need that. And I want whatever it is that they do, whether it's a career in public service or whether it's just, being a good citizen, a good consumer of the news, a good volunteer. And I don't mean that in the sense I do, I guess, a more dictionary definition of the word. They need to be a community, an engaged citizen of their communities. I want all those things, but I will say that we have some work to do to make all that as possible for them as it was for us. Because right now it's like the pathways are bizarre, they're surreal, and we've got to fix that and soon. So their great prime years are not wasted trying to figure out. Now they can be part of the solution as well, but we all got a lot of work to do collectively to get this thing back on track.
Thank you. Oh, okay. So we're going to take a couple questions from the audience. If you have a question, we'll raise a hand. I think we have a microphone going around.
Yeah, a couple over here.
Hi, I'm a native of Oklahoma City, a proud native and a product born and raised there. Left in 1995, unfortunate year to have that be the thing on the map for Oklahoma City at that time. proud product of Oklahoma City Public Schools. My mom was a public teacher. I was a Jefferson Middle School statesman on the south side, but I grew up on the north side. My dad was a cellist in the Oklahoma City Symphony, what became the Philharmonic. What strengths, this is something I've thought about a lot and I think about now. I've been here in Knoxville since '08. What strengths do you see the diverse demographics of Oklahoma City, which I do think is a strength? No one is surprised to hear that. Lending to its character and potential. What strengths do you see the diversity lending to those things? Thanks.
Well, the first assertion I have to make is, and because you may not know, but the rest of the room may not, Oklahoma City is a very diverse place. Demographically, it's like 50% non-white, but for the kids of OKC, it's like 60% non-white. We have a fast-growing Latino population. I alluded to it in my remarks, but it's 1 out of every 5 residents now of Oklahoma City. And that wasn't true in 1995, but 1 out of every 5 residents is Latino. So I'm certainly an American who thinks that communities can derive great strength from diversity, especially, of course, it stands to reason that a lot of that Latino community is first generation or immigrants. And obviously we know as a country, just objectively, what a great asset immigration has been for us in so many ways. So we also have, as you know, a very now established and very entrepreneurial Vietnamese community. We took in a lot of refugees in the 70s and 80s, and so we have a great pho scene, for example. We took in a disproportionate number of Afghan refugees, a few years ago. So it's like it takes many years sometimes and decades, but we may be talking 20 years from now about an amazing contribution being made to our community by our Afghan refugee community, just like the Vietnamese community has. So one thing, that I thought was really important. Well, first of all, was like I had to share some of what I just said to you with my own city when I took office. We're 620 square miles, so we like almost literally can live in our bubbles. We don't see that diversity sometimes. And the leadership of our city was very disproportionately white male from Northwest Oklahoma City. And in fact, like I'm the 38th mayor, and all 38 mayors came from Northwest Oklahoma City. All 38 mayors are white, and 37 of them are male, right? So how could you, if you were a kid in Oklahoma City who is obviously, quite likely, the likelihood is you are none of those things, going to look at that wall of mayors and say, yeah, I'm going to be a part of this city's leadership someday. Doesn't feel very welcoming, does it? So, part of what I had to do at the beginning was just like kind of reestablish who we are so that everybody understands that. For example, quite literally, we had a wall of mayors. It was in the conference room of the mayor's office, and it was all the old mayors, and it was a bunch of old white guys. And so I respectfully moved them down the hall, and I replaced them with 20 pictures of Oklahoma City kids that were demographically representative of Oklahoma City's kids. So that if you looked at those pictures, and if you had all of Oklahoma City's kids all in one place, they would look like those pictures. And there was some power in having the young people looking at us as we were making the kind of vital decisions that would be made in that conference room. But also it was just a way to communicate to visitors and our residents alike, like this is what Oklahoma City looks like, and it's certainly what Oklahoma City's future looks like. And you better figure out a way to like work within that, And so that's symbolic, but that stuff can matter too. And certainly in our boards and commissions, which when I took office were 90% white and 80% male, now they're like, I think maybe 60% male and like maybe 70% white. I mean, we've made dramatic changes and we still have work to do, but we've increased by multiples the number of women and people of color on our volunteer boards and commissions. So all of that was like the work that I had to do to bring about the value that you're talking about, so that those communities really do feel like a part of our city's narrative and truly are a part of our city's narrative. And I would say that like when you think about what a short amount of time really that we've done all this in, it's quite a sea change, and you can feel it. I don't know how much you get back, if at all, but like it really feels different, and in so many ways. I did all those things because I agree with you that there's great value in diversity. But at the end of the day, what matters is all of those people I just described are residents of our city. There's 712,000 people in our city, not just the white males from Northwest OKC. And we all got to be a part of this deal. And if we're not, then that's like our loss. We're wasting talent, you know? So I wanted to make sure that I was doing my part because I think that's the mayor's role, is to represent everybody and to make sure everybody has equal opportunity. And I'll never deliver that, but that's what I should be working on every day that should be my aspiration. Is that responsive to what you asked? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So we're out of time. It's 6:30.
I don't have anywhere to be. I live here now.
One more? Do you have one more? Okay, we're going to do one more.
I'd just like to say it's been a pleasure to listen to you speak, and I promise to be a good volunteer in and out of Neyland Stadium. And this is a bit of an ad hoc question, but just to sort of emphasize the emphasis of your speech on conciliatory politics and the sort of role that plays with politicians and policymakers trying to build compromise within their communities. With your great experience that you've had in Oklahoma City and in the state legislature, would you give any specific recommendations, whether it be at the state or federal level, to sort of bring back that culture of compromise in an era of deep partisanship?
Well, two things. Okay, so first of all, I want to define what compromise really looks like. I mean, I did to some extent in my remarks, but it kind of makes me laugh because, like, obviously you've got some people that are not compromising and they're not even listening. But then you have like another group of people who will listen, but they forget that you got to do the second part, which is you got to actually take some of what you just heard and incorporate it into the outcome. I mean, I see that play out among political leaders who will be like, well, I had a meeting with them, you know. Okay, well, did you actually like take anything? And here's what I say. This is how dedicated I am to compromise, is like, I will take some of your desired outcome and add it to mine, even though I am unconvinced that you are right. Like, you have to have that commitment to compromise, that I still think you're wrong, but you deserve to have a piece of this outcome, you know? And so I'm going to, I'll take the best part I think that I can live with. Obviously, I don't want to take something that's anathema to me any more than you do, but like, I'm going to incorporate you in this outcome. And that's my priority more than anything else. So that's really important. Here's the other thing I want to say about this, though. You have to have not to belabor this point about election reform, but you have to have incentive structures where elected officials are actually rewarded for this type of behavior, because there's a rational reason why so many people running for office might run TV commercials saying, I will never work with the other side. I will never even talk to them. I won't be caught like in a picture with a person from the opposite party. Well, they're finding that that's what's being rewarded, in their primaries. That's why I think that the closed partisan primary, the very small number of extreme people with extreme approaches and extreme ideologies making these gatekeeping decisions for the rest of us is so problematic, because it's like, if you're in Congress now, if you're going to compromise and work with somebody, across the aisle, you really can't tell anybody. You're worried somebody might find out, and because that you think you'll get primaried over it, and what kind of, how is that going to work out for us? So we've got to create incentive structures electorally that actually give some hope for rewarding that kind of behavior. I'm old enough to remember when people used to say that in their advertisements: works across the aisle, get things done. Now that's not being rewarded by primary voters. And I don't know. I think it's easier to just fix the system than to try to convince primary voters that they're idiots. I think we just got to everybody deserves a voice, but like, their voices are way too loud, and their voting power is far disproportionate to how many of them they actually are. So it's like, we got to put them back in their place. The 70% of us in the middle who are spread, kind of divided and conquered across Republican, Independents, Democrats, we have to kind of take back our political system. Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor Holt, thank you for those thoughtful words and for inspiring this next generation. And I have an appropriately heavy, Mayor Holt told me earlier that it's only an award if it's really heavy. So it is appropriately heavy.
Maybe inappropriately heavy, actually.
We'll see. Baker Award for Public Service. So hang on.
Okay, well, here, you need help with that? We don't want to drop it. Wow, that's really cool. Look at that. Let's go. Here, come over.
And on behalf of the Baker School, the faculty, the staff, our current students, our future students, and the people in this room who support us, despite the fact that they are none of those things, but are here routinely, we thank you for being here and really appreciate your work. Let's give him another round of applause.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. I got to keep your hands on this. Yeah. Thank you so much. Are you sure? Sure you got it?